Good morning and welcome to Sunrise Weather. I'm meteorologist Rich Johnson. Thanks so much for joining us. And hey, we're almost out of December, ready to start a new year. Not quite there yet. Let me show you what we're looking like for this Sunday morning. And we're going to start over across the northeastern United States. And hey, you want to be careful out there. We do have some locally low visibilities, dense fog right around New York City. I think in town itself, I was checking some of the visibilities up around 6 miles, but many areas right around the tri-state, visibilities are anywhere from around a quarter mile to a half mile. So if you're going to be out getting ready to go into church services, make sure you're extra careful due to the fact that you're not going to be able to see too well, especially the morning hours. Right up through the Connecticut Valley and a good chunk of eastern Pennsylvania, right down to south central Pennsylvania, the lower Susquehanna Valley, visibilities are low due to the fact of the fog out there, but the wind should pick up later in the day, and that fog will disperse by later this morning. That's the other concern that we're watching for, is the high winds. Strong winds we're expecting to kick in later today. The reason for that, well, it's the cold front that's coming in from the west right now into Ohio. Some of the gusts around 50 miles an hour. For instance, over toward Buffalo and upstate New York, some of these gusts could be anywhere from around 50 to perhaps 60 miles an hour. Very windy time of it during the day. Those will be westerly winds after the southerly winds currently are bringing the warmth in. All right, as we look at the latest radar, not much happening. It is a mild morning. Do have some patchy fog near Portland. Just 40 degrees. It's a warm one out there. Most of the precip lifting up and heading right over toward New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. As we check the forecast for the Northeast, how are we looking for this Sunday? Well, the way it's shaping up is very mild, unseasonably mild, with temperatures into the mid to upper 60s. Washington, D.C., we're looking for a high almost 70 degrees today. The southerly winds eventually switching over to westerly winds. That's going to happen over to around Buffalo later this afternoon. That's when you need to be concerned, when those westerly winds really start to kick in. As we check one of their forecasts, call it the temp trends here, and then over to Philadelphia, we go from the 60s, drop down to the 40s most of the week. So overall, not very cold week coming up, and that's going to be really the same forecast east of the Mississippi, where it is really not going to be that cold of a time period. Let's continue our track here, and this time we'll go to the southern United States. And as we look at the south, the way it's shaping up, it is foggy. Really anywhere just east of Atlanta, Greenville, Spartanburg, up to Charlotte and Raleigh, fog advisory, dense fog advisory is posted. Even right now, over toward Greenville, Spartanburg, visibility is pretty low, down to around a quarter mile roughly. Also, some of the fog over toward the coast of South Carolina, not in the fog advisory at this point, but there will be some other areas outside of this zone that you can still find some low visibility. Also around Raleigh, visibility anywhere around a quarter to around a half mile. Some areas of the south also concerned about the gusty winds here. The advisories including Birmingham and right up to the mountains, southern Appalachians. Some of the gusts here not as strong. We're not looking for the 60-mile-an-hour winds like we're going to find possibly over to Buffalo, but Birmingham, as the front blows by, it's getting close to doing that, if not already. Winds will switch from the west, and some of the gusts will be 30 miles an hour plus today, so it will be a breezy day, no doubt about it. As we check out some of the radars across the southern United States, the way it's shaping up is that we do have a line really stretched all the way from Tennessee down through Alabama into central Louisiana. A few thunderstorms racing ahead of that over towards southeastern Alabama. In between Nashville and Knoxville, you can see the line of rain here, a little tricky heading up along I-40. Head farther to the south. Over to Atlanta, you're looking dry after a little patch of rain. Heavier rain coming in, I would say the next 2 to 4 hours from, well, not probably 2, more like 4 hours, closer to 4 hours out there. And looking at the latest radar, a few thunderstorms north of Pensacola, also north of New Orleans, a few rain showers here, all lifting to the east. Occasionally, some of those storms could be strong. All right, let's go to the forecast. Jumped a little bit ahead. Let's go over to our forecast for the south, then we'll look at that. For today, showers and storms moving away from New Orleans, Pensacola, Tallahassee, over to Macon. Better chance of some of these thunder showers building up, maybe all the way up to around Charlotte. Let's look at some video, some of the scenes out of Michigan. And the way it was looking here was a little slick, to say the least. And you can see some of the rain that was coming down at times, and we were looking at some of the precip out, fog and flood out there, and had some rather warm weather, so we had all the snow. Now we're looking at a different story, and also be wary of the gusty winds. Some of the winds will be in excess of 50 miles an hour. That is happening as the westerly winds are moving through Ohio at this point. Also a little snow near Chicago up to Green Bay, maybe a 1 to 3 inch snow. Some of the heavier rains trying to slide farther to the south through eastern Kentucky. Coming up here at the Weather Channel, we'll keep you updated on sunrise weather with the latest with the fog advisories as well as the damaging wind threat. Well, good Sunday morning to you. It's time for our sunrise weather, and across areas of the east, there's a lot of fog out there. There's wind that is going to be bothering you probably if you're going to be out traveling around. Fog advisories out around New York City and really through eastern Pennsylvania. So we're watching for more in the way of low visibilities this Sunday morning. Although farther to the west, that changes from fog over to high winds, and the reason for that, if you get the winds, it's going to stir up the atmosphere. It'll dissipate the fog. So for the morning hours anyhow, we're looking for the dense fog, places like southern New England, off to the west of Boston. Boston visibility fine at this point, but down to New York City, eastern Pennsylvania, low visibility in the fog. Farther to the west, the cold front racing through Ohio. So if you're going to be traveling anywhere along 70, you could potentially go from foggy conditions then to very windy weather as the cold front is continuing eastward. The winds will switch from the south-southwest over to the west or west-northwest. Winds could be in excess of 50 miles an hour times. A very mild day out there. Pittsburgh 61 degrees, and the showers will increase ahead of the front into the northeast. As we travel down I-95, most of 95 looking fine here. The top end, so to speak, right over through the Carolinas. Some rain certainly possible. And what goes along with that also, just like farther to the north, there's potential for some gusty winds farther to the west, but fog this morning. Much of North Carolina, South Carolina, and really a fairly large chunk of east central Georgia, almost over to Atlanta. Rain chances farther to the south, a few thunderstorms building up southern Alabama. Those are likely drift over toward Georgia, and off to the north over to around Chattanooga early this morning. The rains are just starting to come in. As we continue on the roadways, this time through the Midwest, overall dry time of it here. Around Chicago, though, as you look down toward the lower end of 90 here, the end point, some flurries around, some light snow possible. Most of it's going to be to the north, like around Green Bay. Over to Green Bay, winter weather advisory, we're expecting a few inches of snow to come in, and at this point it's coming down pretty good. That's with that front bypassing and with that low pressure center causing some of the snow. As we continue our track, this time it's going to take us over to the northwest, and there's some rather rough weather to be looking at on your Sunday up and down the 5 here. This time normal weather in the sense that it is going to be raining around Seattle and Portland all the way down to Northern California. Of course, we've been dealing with the past couple weeks of snow, both those locations. Now we have rain, could be locally heavy, and with all the snow that's been out there, snow melt, there could be some flood issues. Let me show you also some of the thunderstorms as we jump over to the southeastern United States. There's an area of rain. So we go to our Titan HD. Look at the line here. This is associated with the front coming in. Heavier rain coming in over to around Chattanooga, also over to Birmingham. Couple thunderstorms ahead of that line. We'll have more on this right after a short break.